Welcome back to Music Student 101. It's time we took a closer look at seventh chords. How they look, how they sound, how they feel, how they function. Here to paint the picture, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
Welcome back to my underground bunker, Matt.
It's good to be back, Jeremy. We took a little time off.
We did.
Not a lot, a couple weeks.
Just a couple of weeks, but we're back and we have some good news, ladies and gentlemen. We are nearing a point of transition from Music Theory 1, so to speak,
right,
to Music Theory 2.
To Music Theory 2. We're approaching the cutoff point, depending on how your particular theory class is structured, of course.
Right.
But we're kind of moving pretty quickly into second semester stuff. I would call what we're doing today still probably first semester-ish.
Uh-huh.
But after this, we're going to be real junior intermediates here.
So we're gonna make sure that we cover the seventh chords to the best of our abilities, and this is gonna actually be a couple of episodes.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I kind of want to talk about something kind of cool, Matt, that I found, or that was introduced to me, I guess.
Excellent. Let's do that.
One of our listeners, Doug Cobes, who you've heard his name before. He's actually financially helped us out.
I have.
One of our donators, or what do you want to call them?
Patrons.
Patrons, yeah. We could have patrons now. We're
really cool people who give us money.
We're getting official, yeah. So Doug Cobes, a part of our community.
A part of our community. I like that.
He recommended me to, he messaged me and told me about this service called Musical U.
Right.
And it's basically a website dedicated to the training and learning of music theory. And ear training, more important.
Yeah, and we played on this a little while. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Actually, and the cool thing is they've actually got a podcast out now. We'll talk about that in just a second. But me and Matt sat down for a little bit and did one of the training. The way it's kind of set out, okay, so it's called Musical U. You go there, you go online and check it out. It's got this kind of, the way it's set out, they have these different training modules. So they kind of start you off and they give you, hey, what's your goals?
Right.
You kind of set out a plan.
Right.
It's very in-depth, and he really went all out on this. This gentleman, Christopher Sutton, entirely pleasant fellow, who's kind of the head of this company. And we've been in contact, and he's got these videos of himself. He welcomes you in with these nice little videos, and you just kind of continue to build your training. And currently, I'm on the interval recognition training module.
Woohoo!
Yeah, and Matt sat down for a second and did the test. The way it's kind of laid out is they'll start off very simple. They'll start off with like octaves in unison.
Right.
And then they'll go.
Doesn't get much more simple than that.
No, it does not. And then they'll let you listen to it a few times. They'll give these kind of, I guess you would call training listens, and then they'll give testing listens where they play the note and they give you a little more time to guess it, think about it. And then finally you're taking this quiz. The quiz is like 20 questions, and in this case it was just us. We were doing everything, the whole mix,
Yeah, we did pretty good too.
We nailed it, man, 100%.
Yeah.
You helped out a lot. I was going to see if you could come back and take the rest of the quizzes with me.
Oh, yeah. I love things like that. It's set up in a pretty intuitive way too. It's not difficult to figure out. It's kind of easy to keep trying, so which is good.
And this is very clever of them. It becomes fun because it's kind of set up like a video game to where you get trophies and stuff and points, experience points.
It kind of reminded me of like a Facebook quiz.
Yeah, it kind of had that feel to it, really. In that it's a very clean interface, but without all the annoying ads.
Without the ads, right. Without all those annoying...
But this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm just breaking the surface. So I didn't want to really say too much about it until I got to spend a little more time with it. But I can honestly say that this is a very helpful tool and worth the cost for sure. I should probably mention it is, of course, a paid subscription. As of this date, circa October 2017, it's a completely reasonable $29.95 a month. And, of course, they have a limited time free trial if you want to check it out and just jump right into it. Now, and this isn't a commercial for these guys, but I'll say this. I'm taking vocal lessons.
Mm-hmm.
About $60, $65 a lesson.
Right.
You know, twice a month. Any music lesson's going to be around that. And then you think about how much you're spending on a college education if you're taking music theory. So this is really a small price to pay, I think.
Yeah. It's definitely worth checking into.
And the other cool thing about it is that there's kind of like a community going on.
Yeah, and we're just sort of becoming aware of the sort of musical community around a lot of these podcasts and things, which is very gratifying to see exists. And
he's actually mentioned us, Christopher Sutton, on his new podcast, Musicality Podcast is what it's called.
Right, yeah.
So, and it's kind of like us, except I think he spends more time talking to musicians and kind of getting to know the inner workings of the musician. And
right, yeah, where we focus more on the theory and things.
Exactly. So, and it does look like they might tackle some like singing tips and maybe a little bit of ear training. So, check it out. You never really know what to. I don't know what to expect, but I know it'll be good and I know it'll be musical. So again, Christopher Sutton, job well done. Musical U, your entire team, your entire community. It's quite fantastic, and I had to give testimony because I can tell I've improved just by the time I've spent on it. You know,
he has. That's no lie.
Matt's noticed. All right, that's a big deal. I don't have to edit so many of those listening exams anymore. I can just get it on the first try, on the first listen. But nice. I wanted to give a shout out to him.
Absolutely.
Musical U, and I wanted to give a shout out to, again, Doug Copes for introducing me to these people. Because I think we can have a cool, long-standing relationship with them.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so.
All right.
Having said that,
what are we talking about today?
Let's nerd out. We are here to talk about, I guess this is going to be kind of a multi-part podcast because we just want to say as much as we can about these 7 chords.
Yeah.
And some of the rules you might expect to find.
Yeah, and some of the things that make 7 chords 7 chords.
Mm-hmm.
And to an extent, 7th chords are just a consonants now. You know, traditional tonal harmony and traditional college music theory put some effort into distinguishing between a triad, right, and a 7th chord. You know, one has 3 notes, one has 4 notes. In both examples, those notes are just separated by thirds while conforming to whatever scale you're in. Right?
Diatonic? Was it?
Yeah, that's what that means. Conforming to the scale you're in means diatonic, and so yeah. Traditional music theory kind of makes a distinction between that. I've heard it said, and I agree. I think that with our modern ears, exposed as we are to so many things, you know, not just Western classical music, but blues and jazz and rock and, you know, music from India and Japan and all of these other places, and pop music, which tends to, you know, follow rules only occasionally. You know, all of these things has had the effect on our ears that 7th chords are sort of considered a consonants now. You know, I mean, you know, they used to be. We used to think of this chord like that as having some pretty inherent dissonance.
The 5/7 chord, is that?
Yes, yeah.
Or the dominant 7
Thank you.
chord,
Yeah, that's a 5/7 chord. You know, as compared to, which is just the triad.
I think we talked about crunchy versus creamy peanut butter.
Yeah, crunchy versus creamy peanut butter, and that's kind of how we, you know, and it takes a certain amount of effort for us to listen in and concentrate and hear that now, right? Much more so than it did back when Haydn was using 7th chords. You know, his audience could hear that very distinctly and felt like there was a very specific, very, very, very specific place that wanted to go, you know, for that reason. And so, in classical music theory, these 7 chords move in some particular ways, right? And that's kind of what we want to talk about today.
So, just to give an idea of what we're going to be talking about specifically today, the 5/7 chord,
5/7,
and the II7 chord,
II7,
and their various inversions.
And that's plenty for one day.
All right, cool.
Yeah. Because these are the ones that just have sort of specific considerations when you're talking about classical music. Now, if you're talking about jazz, if you're talking about rock, maybe less so, but it's still good to know these distinctions, even if you're going to decide to sort of ignore them. Because if you decide not to ignore them, they can give, kind of like when we were talking about doing the circle of fifths chord progressions, it can give your music a real sense of forward motion if you just obey some of these kind of pretty simple rules and make your music sound like it's got a direction that it might not sound like otherwise, right? And it can definitely make some killer melodies and some killer poignant sort of transitions from one chord to the next. So it's good to know stuff.
Yeah,
right. Always good to know stuff.
I'd say so. Well, and I guess we're gonna start off with the most important, right?
Let's do that. The most important, in my personal opinion, anyway, and I don't think I'm alone on this. The 5/7. So the 7 chord based off the 5th scale degree. So what key should I be in here?
Let's just do C.
Let's just stay in good old-fashioned C major. In which case the 5 chord is going to be our root of our 7th chord, and we're going to stay diatonic. So we're going to be G, B, D, and F, making what is called a major minor 7 chord, or also is called a dominant 7, because this is so common that they just refer to it as a dominant 7. Right? And again, I just shifted it up an octave is all. This is probably the most important chord in tonal harmony, because what this chord...
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Is it more important than 1 because it tends to have a function where 1 it sits there?
It's more important than the 1. As a 7th chord, it's more important because a 1/7 chord is not something you see very much in classical music. As just a chord in general, the reason this is so important is because this is what affects motion. I could play 1. Great, right?
It's a chord.
It's a chord. There it is, right? It is when I play 5/7 that I want it to move. Right? And so now we've created something there. Now we've created a type of, and what if, I played 5/7, but then held it for a while, and then did other crazy stuff, and then sort of kept that going by doing, and then moving along to, let's do some other 7 chord. And then coming back to 5/7. Right. So it is this 5/7 chord that sets up sort of everything, right? In some sense, all music is starting with this chord that is then sort of, we're kind of playing around and trying to prolong that, push back to that 1. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. In a lot of ways, the most important chord ever.
Yeah.
There are some considerations in working with this chord in terms of classical music theory. Right?
Are we referring to voice leading?
We're referring to voice leading.
Okay.
That thing that you can get really, really bogged down in. It can be almost like a chess game or computer programming. If this, then this, else.
Yeah.
If X, then Y, else Z, kind of stuff, right?
If I put this here, then that's going to affect this over here.
Yeah, exactly. Because remember that we want to avoid parallel fifths and octaves. We want to avoid direct fifths and octaves. We want to have a chord that we can recognize, right? So we typically are going to need a 3rd and a 5th, right?
Yeah.
And we've got all of these rules to try conform to and is really confusing. And the 5/7 takes a little while to master from the from the perspective of those rules, but we can do it. Right. So just to start off, the 5/7.
Another quick question, actually, because of its dominant, because its presence, its overwhelming presence, would you say it has more rules typically than most other 7 chords, the 5/7 chord?
I think it has more rules because of the nature of the chord.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because of its great function, but just by the fact that what it has is 2 leading tones, right?
Yeah.
Those 2 leading tones are the 3rd of this chord, which is scale degree 7, right? And this wants really, and we've talked about leading tones before, right?
Yeah.
This leading tone wants really, really bad to resolve upward to do, right?
Yeah.
To our tonic note. This 5/7 chord also has this scale degree 4, right? And this scale degree 4 wants really, really bad to resolve down to scale degree 3, fa moving to mi. Right? The reason both of these want to resolve this way is because of these half-step relationships in the scale, right? So I'm playing with the 2 half steps in my major scale.
Yes.
Yeah. This scale degree 7 and scale degree 4 is creating a tritone. Possibly the most dissonant interval ever. Actually not, but it was certainly so dissonant that, there's that famous myth about middle-aged monk composers would refuse to do it because they thought it would call the devil down on them and all that kind of stuff. There's definitely no question that this is something that in tonal harmony has to be resolved. And they have to resolve this way.
That's like the shiny red button. It's like...
Yeah.
There had to be this one monk who finally sat down and said, oh, what the hell? I'm going to do it. And then he hit the tritone and the devil didn't come through his window.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he did it and nothing happened. and so he did it again. Yeah. A few hundred years later, we have Schoenberg, right? And we have to do it.
He'd go straight to hell.
Right.
If the devil was really looking out for dissonance.
Right. But devil or not, no reason to bring the devil into this.
Nah.
This definitely does want to resolve, right? And it's that resolution that sort of sets up instances. Because scale degree 7 wants to go up to 1. Scale degree 4 wants to go down to scale degree 3, right? We want to have a complete chord, which means the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th of the 7th chord.
Truly.
Yeah. And we want to resolve it to a complete chord. Which I did not just do. Reason being, if we move from a root position 5/7 chord to a root position 1 chord and keep all of those things intact, we're going to break rules.
We're going to break some rules. Okay.
Yeah. Because everything kind of has somewhere it wants to go, and by putting by sending everything where it has to go, we kind of end up with an incomplete tonic chord. What I mean is the root, the 3rd, and the 5th are not all there. So, for example,
without some doubling or overlapping.
Without some doubling, some overlapping, right? Whereas there's just right. Yeah. So, one of these voices, this one basically, is going to have to overlap in unison. The scale degree 7 going to scale degree 1. So this is a typical problem with 5/7 to 1s. I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's something that happens. We learn to call that 1 chord an 8/8/3 chord in a lot of instances.
8/8/3 chord.
Yes. 1/8/8/3 as its figured bass sign.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, meaning the octave is doubled and then there's a 3rd. And what we have done is omit the 5th of that chord.
I see.
Yeah, something that is very, very common. The other option is to just go ahead and make our 7th chord an incomplete chord. If you do that, I would either omit the 5th, right, and same deal, or I would omit the 3rd.
So in the case of these 7th chords, we're discussing how, and even though right now we're doing 4-part textures,
Yeah.
we're still having to kind of omit a certain note in order to make proper voice leading.
Yeah,
work,
and
right?
by omit, I don't mean erase the voice. I mean basically in 4-part textures, double at the unison somewhere.
So
Or not even at the unison, double at the octave somewhere.
So if we're looking at a 7 chord, a full 5/7 chord, all root, 3rd, 5th,
Root
and 7th.
position
Root position, yes. And we have to make a decision to omit one of those notes.
Yeah.
We've decided that the 5 is for what reason is the 5 the first to go?
The 5th, you mean?
I'm sorry, yes, the 5th.
Yeah.
5th.
Well, the 5th is the first to go because you can still pretty easily hear that a 5/7 chord is implied without the 5th. Because if you've got the root, and you've got the 3rd, and you've got the 7th,
Oh yeah.
you know, your ear kind of can make that leap and say, okay, you know, there should be a 5th in there. But there's not. It's not bothering you that much.
No, it still sounds very much like a 5/7
Yeah.
chord.
Second reason for that to go is kind of the same thing. If you omit the 3rd, and in a triad, we should never omit the 3rd, right?
Yeah.
Because then you don't know what chord you're playing in a triad.
It's just a biad.
It's just a.
That's probably not a word. I don't know.
Dyad. It's just a dyad.
A dyad, huh?
Yeah. So you should never omit the 3rd if you've got just a triad. But if you're talking about the 7th chord, you know, the fact that you have that G along with that D and that F, you know, it's like, well, okay, I know we don't have a D minor chord because of the G and et cetera, et cetera. That still sort of feels like it's implying, you know. And so that's the next best option. Don't omit, you know, obviously if you omit the 5, you're not going to have a 5 chord. And if you omit the 7th, you're not going to have a 7 chord. So those aren't really options.
Right.
And that's if you want to make the 5/7 chord incomplete and then lead it to a complete tonic chord. The other option is, and for my money, just my personal opinion, but the more common and the easier one to pull off, have a complete 5/7 chord and resolve it to an 8/8/3 chord. And all of this is only if both of these chords have to be in first position.
I see.
Right? And if you just really, really want both of these to come out as full chords, you know, don't forget that we do have the option of cadential motion, where we do something sort of like right, and 7th chords can be part of a cadential motion. You know, we could make that chord up there sort of a passing tone. You know, we go.
Nice.
Yeah. So there are ways to also do this as complete chords.
Both root position, or were there inversions in what you just did?
Nope,
then?
those were root positions.
Position. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I shall do it again. So. And there's also a thing called the covered cadence.
Covered cadence.
Yeah, or sometimes referred to as a frustrated cadence.
Huh.
Yeah, where you can, and then this scale degree 7 that wants to go up to 1. This scale degree 7 can actually move down to scale degree 5. Provided that some other voice comes and covers that scale degree 1 that it was going to go to. So you can go. So so your ear is still hearing the resolution that it wanted. You know, it's just hearing it. It's just another voice jump down to take over that resolution. So
The frustrated cadence.
The frustrated cadence. And it will frustrate your theory professor.
Ah, okay.
And only do that in an inner voice. If your scale degree 7 is an upper voice, don't you even think about it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and only do that if another voice comes down to hit that note that 7 should have resolved to.
Interesting.
So ways to get around the sort of voice leading problems with root position 5/7 to root position 1.
Sounds like it could be frustrating for the student as well.
Yeah, it's something to consider. You are definitely going to have 5/7 to 1s. I mean that happens in all of music. So it's good to sort of go in thinking about some possible solutions to some of these. Because if you're just writing 5/7 1 boom done, you've almost certainly written parallel fifths somewhere, or had a voice show up out of nowhere or something, or made an awkward leap.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, do you think we've done the root position 5/7 justice?
Yeah, pretty much.
Move on to inversions.
Yes. So inversions of the 5/7 chord. 5/7 to 1, what we've just been playing, is what we consider very, very strong motion, right? It really pulls to that 1. It is what makes up most perfect authentic cadences and imperfect authentic cadences. This is really considered a very, very strong cadential motion, meaning we're going to hit that 1 and we're going to feel like we've come to a real resting place. The end of the phrase, the end of the section, the end of the whole piece of music.
The finish line.
Yes. The first inversion 5/7 chord, what we would call a 5/6/5, can be part of cadential motion, right? So, right. It is often considered weaker than that, right? It is often thought of as not really having that same super huge pull and resting, because when I do this and listen to that bass note, right, it's just got a little bit more of a pull than, and I'll even play a.
I can definitely hear it there.
Yeah, that is still sort of cadential, but not as much. And it's often used in 5 chords that are not really trying to be cadential.
And
remember that
somewhere else in the middle of the music somewhere.
You're right, somewhere else in the middle of the music. Remember that this 7 really, really, really wants to move up to the tonic, right? And we can't do anything else with that. Don't even think about a frustrated cadence with the 7th in the bass voice, right?
Yeah.
Or the leading tone rather in the bass voice. So we've got to do something here, and it'll move to 1, and which will then move to another 5, and or whatever. That's much more common for the 5/6/5. Leading tone still has to resolve to the tonic. Your 7th still has to resolve down by a half step. That's still going to be definitely the case.
The 7th of the chord.
The 7th of the chord, yeah, still has to resolve downward a half step.
Yeah,
pretty much always. And that's what compels it to lead up to 1. And like I said, you will see that in cadential motion, but it's not considered as strong a cadence as that 5/1 motion. The bass likes to move in 5/1 motion,
right,
around cadences, and the more the bass gets to stomp around by moving in 4ths and 5ths, the more solid everything is going to feel.
Nicely put.
Yeah.
So that was the first inversion.
That was first inversion.
Is there any more rules we should observe regarding that before we move on to the second inversion?
I could sit here and spit rules out at you all day for all of these and common ideas and things. Just keep in mind that your leading tone has to resolve up to scale degree 1, and that your scale degree 4, the 7th of the chord, has to resolve down to scale degree 3. Pretty much whatever you do.
Okay. Good hard rule.
Yeah, good hard rule.
Right on.
Moving on to second inversion, the 4/3. We talked about second inversion triads, right? 6/4 chords.
We did.
Passing 6/4, neighboring 6/4, cadential 6/4, and what was it? Pedal 6/4.
Pedal 6/4. Yeah.
And those were the only ones we had, right? You don't just write 6/4s randomly or in
willy-nilly.
Yeah, right. The same principles apply for 5/4/3, which is 5/7 chords in second inversion. They make great sort of passing from 1 to 1/6 to a first inversion tonic chord. You know, you can. Hear that with the and like inversions often do, they make the bass more melodic. They make they get this kind of nice.
Yep, a little walk up the scale.
Yeah.
So the first chord you hit was a 1 chord.
Yeah.
The second was the actual 5/7.
Yeah, I'll try to clean up my voice leading a little bit too. So 1, 5/4/3, 1/6. And wouldn't it just sound beautiful to go from there to like a 4 chord or, and then like a cadential 6. I'm just writing music now. Yeah. It's almost like I do this for a living.
That was very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
So the point being the second inversion 5 chord made it easy.
Yeah.
For that scale degree motion.
Right, and you can go backwards too. You can do the same kind of thing going down. And it can lead between these two inversions. Of course, that last 1/6 chord could also have been a 6 in a 6 chord in inversion, an A minor chord if we're in C. That's something that could happen. With the 5/4/3, again considered a weaker kind of motion as far as cadential motion is concerned. More talking about 5 chords that are kind of in the middle of a passage of music rather than at the end of the phrase,
right?
Where a root position is going to be more likely.
Mm-hmm.
That's 5/4/3.
Okay.
5/4/2. Yeah, with the 7th itself in the bass. Again, let's see if I can even do this. Again, moves to a 1/6, just great. Because that 7 chord has to move down. Be careful as you do this that you don't end up with doubling the 3rd in your 1 chord, because you might want to. Yeah. But there's always the covered cadence rule. That's helpful.
The what? What's that now?
There's always the covered cadence rule.
The covered cadence rule.
Yeah, or the frustrated cadence. Drop that down or double it. You can have incomplete 1 chords. Way, 3-part, it's better than nothing, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But with all of these inversions, the 7th needs to resolve down by a half step, and the 3rd of that chord needs to resolve up by a half step to get that tritone pushed out and resolved the way it wants to.
That was going to be a question I had, and you answered it obviously. But in my head, I was wondering if the rules change when the inversions are different.
No,
you know what I mean.
No, and as a general rule, part writing rules don't change. And tendency tones, as a general rule, don't change. It's not like the 7th of the chord wants to resolve down by a half step less because you're in an inversion.
Right.
Inversions can create problems.
Yeah.
Inversions can create it can solve problems. It's kind of like alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
Yep.
What's important is that you know what these tendency tones want to do.
Yeah.
And then it's easier to write chords that make sense and get you better theory grades.
Yeah. And in the 5/7 chord, of course, those key tendency tones that we discussed were the 4 wanting to go down to 3.
Right.
And then the 7 wanting to go up to 1.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And scale degree 5 wanting to go to 1 in root position chords. That's not a hard fast rule the way the other two are, but if it does that, it's going to have a sense of finality.
That'll be one heck of a resolution.
Yes, it will. The greatest resolution.
And do the rules of omission stay constant regardless of inversions?
Yes.
Yeah, for the most part.
Pretty much, yeah. With inversions, it is easier to not have to omit anything.
Okay, yeah, so you're not even put in that position.
Right, yeah.
No pun intended.
Like I said, they can solve problems sometimes.
Yeah.
They can solve problems. With inversions, you're not always even put in that position. You're right, but to the extent that they are, omit the third or the fifth of omit the fifth of a seventh chord if you have to omit something. Omit the fifth of a triad if you have to omit something.
Right. Because otherwise we lose the, what do you call it?
The flavor of that chord.
The flavor, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a word for that we used a long time ago.
Identity.
Identity.
Roadmap. Yeah. Fingerprint.
The major or minorness.
Major or quality.
Quality. That's the word I was looking for. Yes. Quality.
The quality of that chord. Yeah. Or just the very fact. I mean, if all you've got is, 2 C's and an E, well, was that a C major chord? Was that an A major chord?
A minor.
Yeah, A minor chord, thank you. Or, was that, what the heck was that chord even?
Good question.
Good question. So be careful with that.
And obviously the rules of omission come into play when you're writing in 3 parts. You have no choice. If you got a 7th chord, you're going to have to omit something.
Yeah, absolutely. You have no choice. And a 7th chord in 3 parts, you absolutely have to omit something. And I would omit nothing from a triad in 3 parts.
Yeah. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've got a pretty good understanding of the 5/7 chord here. Before we move on, I have a couple of quick little things.
All right, let's hear it.
Because this doesn't come up a lot, but it is a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The 5 chord we've been discussing thus far, the 5/7 chord.
Yes.
And the major key is diatonic.
Diatonic.
All the notes are part of that scale.
Yes.
Now, what happens with the minor key? What's going on?
Well, with the minor key, here's the thing. For most of classical music, minor 5 has not been used. So if I was in C minor, right, and that's the diatonic, or that's C natural minor.
Natural minor, yeah.
Yeah. Inharmonically equivalent to E flat major. Go hear our podcast on scales. Blah blah blah.
That's a good one.
If I was in that key, the 5/7 chord diatonically would be a minor 7 chord. Never happens.
Yeah.
Never happens. And the reason is classical composers really liked the major 5/7's tendency tones.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes it emotional. They like having it pull. This doesn't feel like it's really pulling anywhere, does it?
What if you resolve that to 1?
Doesn't work, does it?
It sounds like some kind of lateral movement.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
So they really did just go ahead and say, well, this lowered scale degree 7 in this minor, well, what if we just made it the major 7 that was a half step away from tonic? They called that harmonic minor.
Mm-hmm.
So now we've got. Right? For the very reason that they want to construct nice harmonies that have the...
Yeah. So what we did was we took that... The scale degree 7 was raised to make the 5 chord a major chord.
Yes, to make the 5/7 chord a major 5/7.
That 7 becomes the 3rd and the 5 chord.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And Again, like I said, go back and here's our episode on scales. We did talk about harmonic minor versus natural minor. Harmonic minor having the raised scale degree 7. Mm-hmm. Yes, that raised scale degree 7 made the minor 5 into a major 5. And that's exactly the reason they did it, so they could do that kind of stuff. And you will see that. You won't see a minor 5 chord, be it 7 or otherwise, in classical music very, very much. Not until you get into the 20th century. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll see it in a lot of folk music and a lot of pop music.
Yeah.
But not as much in classical music. Classical music is all about counterpoint and all about resolving these notes going where they want to go.
So we're kind of scratching the surface of chromaticism here.
Yeah, beginning to. Very little bit, first grain of sand on that beach has kind of been moved out of position.
And that happened in the minor key when the 5 chord became a dominant 5 chord rather
dominant 5 chord, yeah.
That minor 5 did sound jazzy the moment you introduced that minor 5/7 chord. That sounded jazzy.
Yeah, jazz music is one of those types of music that sort of consider 7th chords a consonants anyway. So they have no problem with that whatsoever.
A song could start off like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And songs do.
And they do.
And they don't. It doesn't necessarily have to go to this could. Or whatever. I've already written one song for you guys today, so yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so keep that in mind. In classical music, at least, that's the first hints of chromaticism is that we're going to alter the scale to keep that a major chord.
Mm-hmm. To make it more musical, to make it more resolving, to make it, make these tendency tones that we require for resolution.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is the 5/7 chord.
That is the 5/7 chord.
Is it not?
Pretty much.
Hey,
and like I said, we could talk about, in this case, do this case, this is what happens here. We could talk about this all day, and it's not going to particularly help you as much, I don't think, as knowing the fundamental rules of what you have to do to make these chords make sense. Right?
Mm-hmm. And before we move on, just so we have it all together at the same time so people can kind of listen, can we, for fun, hear a 5/7 chord in root position, all 4 notes?
Root position, all 4 notes.
And then let's hear what happens if you omit the 5th. And now let's hear what happens if you omit the 3rd. Food for thought.
Yep.
That's how they sound.
Yep, listen carefully.
Very cool. Well, the 5 chord, that's pretty important. That's a pretty great chord.
Pretty great chord. And you remember our circle of fifths episode?
I do.
Where we sort of went backwards down to the circle of fifths, and the next chord was the 2 chord.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah, good times. And that 2 chord is probably also a very, very important chord. There is no piece of classical music that I've ever seen that doesn't have a 2 chord in it somewhere.
Yeah.
And in fact, most of them have ubiquitous occurrences of the 2 chord. And that 2 chord is very often a 2/7 chord. Which, if we were in C major, we're talking about a D minor 7 chord.
Sweet.
Yeah. You see this chord in root position all the time. Where it will like to move to 5. And I played a 5/7 there. Wasn't that pretty?
Nice.
Yeah. Which then goes back to 1, right? The 2/7 chord, it does not have the leading tone. So it has a little more scale degree 7. So it has a little more freedom, but it does have a 7th, and that 7th does still want to resolve down.
Yeah.
It will to the 3rd of the next chord. That is always going to be a thing about 7ths in classical music. With all of these 7 chords, the 7th of the chord will want to resolve down.
in all cases, this is the flat 7 we're talking about.
Yeah.
In the chord. So it be at the dominant 7 chord, it's still a flat 7 from the root.
Yeah.
And then so forth with the with this minor 7 chord.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
minor 7 going down.
Minor 7 is always going down. And so we have, what was I playing? Oh, yeah. So we have, you see this in root position a lot. This will make a strong 5/7 to 1 cadence even stronger because you've got even more motion by fourths and fifths in the bass, right? So you got just harmonized as you will see that. Definitely, especially around cadences, this 5/1. However, the absolute most common 2/7 chord inversion is first inversion.
Okay.
2/6/5.
The 2/6/5 chord. I have heard that a few times actually.
Yes, and it's because it pushes. It pushes the third of this chord is actually scale degree 4, right? So you get this, right?
4/5/1.
Yeah. So yeah, 4/5/1. We could have harmonized this as 4/5/1. Great. A little boring, right? Or we could harmonize this as 2/6/5. 5/1. Right? It's got a little bit more of a kind of a, a little more dissonance in it, a little more crunchiness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of uncertainty. Way more colorful.
Yeah.
Than that.
Yeah.
Boring old major 4 chord.
Yeah. And that's by far the most, and 2/6/5 can be used in other ways too, and by far the most common occurrence of a 2/7 chord. 2/4/3, you're approaching the 5 from the other way. And the same kind of principles can go on. That can be a great chord in so many ways for moving down the scale. Or something, I don't know, but moving down the scale in the bass, things like that. Again, the 2/6/5 is actually a very strong cadential motion. You see that a lot because it reminds the ear of 4/5/1, which is a very strong cadential motion.
In the bass, you're talking about?
Yeah, in the bass, because scale degree 4 up to scale degree 5 and down to 1. Very, very common. 2/4/3 down to 5. That's again, or something else. That's again more the kind of stuff you'll see in the middle of the passage, and less at the end, less of the cadence in the phrase.
And that was the example you just played for us, the
2/4/3.
2/4/3, okay.
Yeah. 2/4/2 has the 7th in the bass. Yeah. And this makes,
Okay.
Can make sort of neighbor motion like that, melodicize the bass. A little bit.
Neighbor motion in that it returned back to where it came
Right.
from whence it came.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It can make some sort of nice suspensions, in upper voices and things too. So kind of definitely an interesting chord, 2/4/2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That 2/7 chord in general is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's fun to talk about 7 chords again.
It is fun to talk about 7 chords again.
Now, if we said everything about that, and that the 6/5 is the most common, and then you can still. It seems like the other inversions are mainly, in theory, reserved for avoiding parallel fifths, avoiding some of these part writing rules, and then also just sometimes allowing for more melodic bass lines. or more interesting?
Those are the two big reasons for inversions. It seems like, yeah, it makes harmonization easier in a lot of instances, and it can make for cool bass lines, and it can make for interesting ways to harmonize stuff, right? If you've got a melody and you want to put chords under it, you knowing that you don't have to write a 4 chord, that you could write a 2-6-5 chord and then have a minor chord there. It gives you a wider range of palette to sort of choose how you want your harmony to sound.
So let's have a little cloud cover go over that sunshine of ours and step into the minor world just a second. If we can. Because now the 2 chord is going to be this crazy diminished situation.
It's going to be a diminished chord, but the rules of the 7th chords are not going to change.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's great.
So back into the sunny day.
The clouds go away. Yeah. So, but can we hear what that diminished 7th chord sound like?
Yeah. Let's see. So in C minor, our 2 chord is going to have an A flat in it, right? So, yeah, that is a nice little chord there. We call that a half diminished.
Half diminished,
right? Yeah, because this is only a minor 7th down, right? D down to C. Still, the same rules are going to apply to 5-7, and then 1.
And does the fully diminished, that doesn't play?
No.
In the diatonically speaking, I guess. Okay,
no,
we're not gonna.
It's not diatonic, so no.
Not gonna worry about that right now.
No, we're not.
But the main difference between half diminished and fully diminished, we've already discussed that too. So
yeah, okay, yeah.
Recap.
Let's recap.
Okay, guys, we shelled out a lot of theory at you.
That's a lot of theory. We're kind of dipping a toe into how 7 chords work in classical music and in your music if you want.
Absolutely. So we're going to leave it at the 5 and the 2 chord for right now. We're going to pick this up on another episode. We're going to move on into the 7th chord and maybe the 4 chord?
Sure. Why not?
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
We have time to figure that out. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and do a quick recap, shall we?
Absolutely.
So we kicked off this conversation with the glorious 5 chord.
The glorious 5 chord.
The ever important 5 chord.
Yes, and making that into a 5-7 chord. And remember that you're going to have to sort of account for yourself if going from root position 5-7 to root position 1. The easiest thing to do is to make what we call a 1-8-8-3 chord, where we're just we're omitting the 5th of that 1 chord. You can try to overcome that by omitting either the 5th, ideally, or the 3rd, I suppose, of the 5-7 chord in that. Or you can do what's called a covered cadence. So this leading tone, which wants to resolve to C, goes down to G so long as something else picks up that C that it was supposed to go to. In whatever you do, remember that scale degree 7 wants to resolve up to 1, and scale degree 4 wants to resolve down to 3. So this inherent tritone is going to resolve to being a major 3rd.
Nice.
In inversions, 5-6-5. It's considered a little bit sort of, it doesn't have the same cadential pull as root position, so it's not as strong cadence-wise. You'll see it in cadences, but it's considered a weaker cadence, and you'll often see it more in just sort of the passage of music. Same thing for the 5-4-3, and the 5-4-2 progressively weaker cadence motion.
Right, okay, so as we invert the cadence gets a little weaker.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And these can typically go to different versions of 1 chords. among other things.
Yeah.
Right.
And these inversions typically happen more within this, not like at the cadences.
Right, yeah, not at the cadences, typically more like in the middle of the piece somewhere, just to be harmonizing a place in the melody. With the II7 chord, you will definitely see and hear a root position II7 chord, and that can very easily move to a 5/7, which then in turn does our little dance and moves to 1. You will see that again. You will see that at cadences. Anytime the bass can move in fourths and fifths, it likes that, and it's going to sound final and solid. In the middle passages of music, you will very, very often see a a 265. Right. Which has that motion of the 4 scale degree 4 in the bass, going to scale degree 5 in the bass, down, and that is also it's a pretty strong cadential motion. You see that in some pretty conclusive cadences too.
Right.
Other inversions of the 2/4/3 and 2/4/2 definitely happen. They tend to be weaker, and they tend to be middle passage kind of stuff.
Okay. Same deal.
Same deal. Yeah.
You won't see that at a cadence necessarily.
The one exception being the 265, which is still considered pretty strong.
Great.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
All right. So I hope that is helpful. We will pick this up later.
Yes, sir. You guys have a good one. We'll see you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Feel free to give us some feedback or send us a message at info@musicstudent101.com. We're always open to suggestions and new ideas.